Let's bring in for analysis Associate Fellow at Chatham House, Dame Roslyn Marsden, who's a former EU Special Representative to Sudan. Dame Roslyn, thank you very much for joining us here on France 24 in English. Are there reasons for optimism given this change in Sudan, or is there a fear that what has been ousted may be replaced with something similar?
Well, I think that the toppling of President Omar al-Bashir after 30 years in power is certainly in itself a huge victory for people power and for non-violent civic resistance. And obviously, after Bouteflika was forced to step down just over a week ago, this is the second time that an African autocrat has been ousted by the military after prolonged protest by young civilians. But I think at the same time, the reaction from the protesters has been one of deep disappointment and anger to hear that what is going to come next is 2 years of military rule. They have been conducting a sit-in in front of the army headquarters, hundreds of thousands of Sudanese, for the last 5 days, to try to persuade the army to side with the people's demands for peace, democracy, and equal citizenship and justice. But they wanted this to be achieved through a genuine transition, democratic transition, and a civilian transitional government. So the announcement today was deeply disappointing because it looked like a repackaging of the previous regime with many of the same faces.
And that sit-down protest outside the military headquarters is set to continue because the protesters are unhappy with the 2-year transition and the military taking control. In some way, though, given the lack of structure politically and the lack of opposition there, it's kind of inevitable that the military has to take charge, I suppose.
Well, in fact, what we've seen over the last 4 months, the opposition groups and various opposition alliances coming together. They all signed the Declaration for Freedom and Change at the beginning of January, together with the Sudanese Professionals Association and a number of civil society organizations. And they've set out quite clearly their political objectives, that they want a transitional government, transitional civilian government that's going to restore freedoms, to respect human rights, to address the economic crisis the country is facing, and of course to prepare for free and fair elections. So there is quite a lot of work going on in coordination between the groups under this umbrella, both on the transitional structure and on their political platform.
What happens to Omar al-Bashir now? I mean, clearly indicted by the International Criminal Court over what happened in Darfur, but clearly he's evaded them ever since 2003. And will that continue? Will he continue to sort of keep out of their clutches, do you think?
Well, General Ibn Auf, who announced that there would be a military council established today, said that President Bashir had been arrested and was in custody, but was in a safe place without revealing his whereabouts. It seems unlikely that if there is going to be a military council with many of the same people who have been in the previous regime, that they're likely to it's unlikely they will hand over Bashir to the International Criminal Court. We don't know yet what might happen to him. It's likely that they might provide protection either within the country or allow him to leave and seek safe haven elsewhere. But of course, the protesters are very clear that they want to see justice served.
Dame Roslyn, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Dame Roslyn Marsden, Associate Fellow at Chatham House and former EU Special Representative to Sudan. Thank you very much for joining us here on France 24 in English and sharing your analysis of the situation in Sudan. We'll bring you, of course, all developments from Sudan as they develop.